It's really a pleasure to have you here, everyone, in this webinar. So welcome to the MassChallenge Convention Center and Convention Series. We will be talking today about alternative proteins. And we are a very international group. So we would love to see where you are from and what company you're from. Would you write in the chat where you're from and what company you work for? That would be great. So everybody knows who we are talking to. Myself, I'm from Switzerland, working for MassChallenge, well, originally from Chile. Probably you already guessed that from my accent. I'm not Swiss. Anybody else writing on the chat? Switzerland, Yannick, perfect. Can the audience also write in the chat? Yes. Excellent. We have people from Switzerland. Who else? We have a lot of people here. I see 2 answers. The Isle of Wight, that is the Matt. UK, Switzerland, Clary, hey Raul, Moritz, nice to see you. Wow, we have a lot of people now. That's great to see. Spain, New York, Boston, Toronto, Belgium, Spain again, Germany, UK, USA, Singapore, excellent. It's nice to see here the diversity of backgrounds here. Israel as well, of course, where all the most successful entrepreneurs come from. Everyone, welcome. So before we get started, probably one of the major questions here the audience may be asking is, why is MassChallenge talking about this topic? Can alternative proteins save the world? And I hope that everybody here knows MassChallenge. If not, I will just explain that very quickly in a second. MassChallenge is a non-profit organization that supports entrepreneurs and innovation through collaboration and development. In the last decade, we have accelerated more than 2,500 startups, generating more than 3 billion in revenues, also 6.7 billion in funding raised, and generated more than 150,000 jobs. So that is the impact that we are doing at MassChallenge, supporting entrepreneurs like you. And we work very closely in Boston, Israel, and Switzerland with plant-based or alternative proteins startups and corporates and investors around that space. That is why we are here together. We have put this excellent panel to talk about that. And to slightly dive into the topic, I want us to think for a moment, what have we done? And here you can see that picture. And this is sad, July 28th. Do you know what July 28th is? This is a Earth Overshoot Day. That is the date in which we humans have consumed all the resources, biological resources that the Earth can regenerate in an entire year. And that is impactful. That is dramatic. Every year, that day is getting closer and closer. It's going to happen earlier and earlier every year if we don't do something. And what does have to do here, alternative proteins, with all of this? Well, as you may know, the meat and the animal-based product industry is causing emissions. And as you may also know that around 25% of the global greenhouse emissions come from agriculture and food production, out of which over 60% come from animal and animal-based products. That is huge. Just to put it in context, that is the same amount of emissions of every driving and flying of every car, truck, and plane in the entire world. So that is huge. And also, around 30% of fresh water finish up in that same industry. 30% of fresh water. You also may know the huge impact on land usage, deforestation, biodiversity loss, It is estimated that if every one of us in the world would switch 100% to a plant-based diet, we would use 77% less of land farm use. And that is a huge piece of land. Just to put it in context, that is the same land size as the size of United States, China, Europe, Australia combined. The combination of all of those surfaces is what we are using today to produce animal-based products. And imagine how this will keep going, how this will unfold if we have to feed now by 2050 9.8 billion people. It is just not manageable, and we have to do something. Now, before we keep going here, let me just ask the audience, because I really want to hear from you. Do you think alternative proteins can save the world? I just launched a poll. Can you write yes or no? I see 40 participants, everybody answering. That's great. Just think of what I just said before, all the damage we are doing. And obviously we can do something, but is it alternative proteins the answer? Yes or no? Most of the people have answered, so I will share the results now. As you can see here, most of the people say yes, we can save the world with alternative proteins. And there is 21% of the people saying no, and there must be really good reasons for that. And that is why we have put together this panel today to discuss about that. And we have really great speakers here. These persons that are here on the slide are people you must know if you're in the food industry. On one hand, we have Andrew Eve, the founder and managing partner, general partner of Big Idea Ventures. Probably Andrew has invested more than any other investor in early stage in the food industry. So he has a lot to say today. We also have Bosco Emparanza. He's a founder of an early stage free animal ingredients platform startup. And I never have seen a startup generating so much traction at such early stage. Their proteins can work pretty much everywhere. So it will be really fascinating hearing what he has to say. And Christoph Yannick, founder of Planted. By now, probably most of you know Planted. Planted is probably the fastest growing startup in the plant-based industry. Over 3 years only, they just raised now 71 million in a Series B. They are in 6 countries, and they have employed by now 170 employees. That is just fast. And now we have also Yannick, moving from Minneapolis, managing a food innovation center, coming back to Switzerland to manage now the Culture Food Innovation Hub, which is a company in cooperation with Bühler, Givaudan, and Migros that is aiming to accelerate the transition of cell culture food into the market. Isn't just that great, the panel we have here? And myself, I will be moderating. I work at MassChallenge. Yearly, I am reviewing around 1,400 startups. Half of it, I think, is plant-based or alternative proteins-based. And I work closely with corporates and investors to accelerate that transition too. So really looking forward to this panel. I will stop sharing my screen now. I just want you to see all the panelists' faces here. Andrew, nice to see you. Bosco, Christoph, and Yannick, a pleasure to have you here. You are really role models to follow here, and I want to actually start kicking off the first question. And just a bit of a housing rules here. We will be taking questions from the audience as we go through the chapters, okay? So audience, you can please write your questions on the Q&A section. I will be taking that up as I see fit. That would be great. Now, let's kick that off with the first question. That's gonna go to Andrew. Andrew, why you don't tell us why are you investing in this space?
Thanks, Nicolas, for the question. So there's lots and lots of different reasons, some sort of personal and some global. You've outlined a lot of the global reasons why, i.e. the challenges of the animal protein industry, its significant contribution to climate change, global warming, some of the things you didn't mention, a lot of the antibiotics that we create as a species, majority of them are actually used for the animal industry to keep the animals that are in our food system devoid of sickness because of the conditions they're in. So they're put in such sort of challenging conditions that we need to fill them up with antibiotics so that they don't get sick and don't get diseases. And ultimately, those antibiotics are finding their way into the food system as well. So not only are we, using animal protein that's climate damaging, but drugs, antibiotics, and so on are coming into the food system via the animals that we're consuming. So if those reasons aren't challenging enough, if we flip to the kind of positive side, there's a cadre or a significant group of true innovators, and Bosco is one of those people, true innovators around the world who are finding ways to create good quality protein that allows us to create the foods we know and love and have grown up with, in ways that don't require animal protein to do so. And so there's the excitement from my point of view of being able to get involved with great companies, great founders, great teams, some of which have gone through MassChallenge in the past, some of which, I hope will go through MassChallenge and Big Idea Ventures in the future. And it's really exciting. It's really exciting to work with great founders who are sort of doing great things and able to make a significant difference. So there's the negative, let's change the world and make it better. And then there's the fun, kind of interesting side of the equation where, people like me get to work with great founders and do amazing things that have the potential to contribute positively to the world. So, and then I could probably go on for another hour answering that question, but those are the three sort of key things that come to mind immediately.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And now, if we see that from a manufacturing point of view, if we consider, for example, companies like Bühler, they are producing machinery pretty much for every single food that's produced in the world and touching probably 2 billion people every day. Yannick, could you tell us why a company like Bühler is entering this space, which, by the way, you're doing already quite a successful job in extrusion and also now in the cultivated space? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Nick, for the question. So I think, big corporates have a role to play in the whole system. We have great innovations, and Andrew, you mentioned a few examples of it. It's also good to see Bosco and Christoph here on the call in that space. Something that corporates are very good at, and I speak now for the Cultured Hub, which includes Migros, Juvero, and Bühler, very good at supply chains and bringing impact on a scale in the market. They have access to the market and they can bring solutions in that have impact on a large group of people. So like you said with Bühler, it's touch points with 2 billion people per day. That's huge scale. What they're often a bit slower at is the innovation and getting to new solutions fast. And so what's exciting, and also why Bühler is in this, is when we combine the two together with the right financing, and Andrew, we speak to you on this point as well, on MassChallenge and bringing all these together and accelerating them, then we can have an impact that people feel in the market. I think when it comes to sustainable protein, if it's plant-based or fermentation or also cultured foods, it's still a very small part of the population globally that has access to these products. I think that's where the big corporates can help move that into mass market. That's sort of the aspect and angle we take on that. And now with the Cultured Hub, an exciting new opportunity as well, really focusing on the space of cultured foods, on fermented foods, and helping those startups accelerate from small production volume into mass market volumes when they can go into production, and making sure those processes work at scale.
Sounds good. I like the direction it's taking on open innovation here. And I would like to hear from Chris. because I'm fascinated always by the story of Planted, how fast it went to market. Everybody just liked them from the beginning. And I know you had a vision early before you wanted to transform the way we consume food and we produce it. Can you elaborate a bit more about that? Why you enter this space, Chris?
Yeah, I think ultimately for me, but also for the company, I think the focus is on how do we sustainably feed probably what's going to be 10 billion people by 2050. So, of course, the environment plays a huge role, animals play a huge role, but ultimately, I think the equation we need to solve is how can we feed 10 billion people by 2050. So for us, we came to the conclusion, or to the clear conclusion, that we need to do it better. So we don't aim to just do meat, do it different or be like meat, but we aim to do it better. And we defined 4 pillars for us that we want to be better in. I think it was already mentioned, but I summarize it maybe here a little bit. One, obviously, is taste. So if you don't have amazing taste, people are not going to buy it again. If you don't hit the price point, then you don't have impact. So we don't want just to feed a couple of European cities and maybe some US cities, but we want to feed or be part of the solution that feeds the world. And so you need to hit price points. Ultimately, consumer health is extremely important. I think it was very much underestimated by some of the early movers. So focusing not just getting the macronutrients right, but also the micronutrients is super important. Things like iron levels or whatever you want to choose. I think a lot of important metrics there. And then sustainability and being transparent about sustainability. I think everybody says now we're 99% better than the animal equivalent or whatever. Like, get real numbers. So we challenge ourselves. We do audits. We have the numbers we work with audited. So I think it's also very important that you're transparent. So we also have to be better in terms of communication and make sure that we transparently show what we do. We, I think, are one of the very first companies in the space that did like a full or good readable sustainability report, I would say. So I think that's also a big challenge. And how do we actually communicate fairly, truthfully, and transparent what we do and maybe what we're not great at. So, for example, we have too much logistics involved, use too much plastics, and focusing on how and talking about what we need to do better is extremely important. So for us, it was getting these 4 things right. And for us, ultimately, we found that the technology stack that works best is the combination of extrusion and fermentation. So combining, I think, 2 very scalable technologies, proven technologies, is for us the key piece to winning and having an impact.
Great, thank you. So you know that sustainability alone may not sell, but if you tackle it with taste, nutrition, and cost, you can make an impact. And now this is a very crowded space. I mean, we have always difficulties to select the best of the best, and I assume you have the same problem here, Andrew. So my question is to Bosco, being a crowded space, why did you decide to enter this space anyways?
Hi everyone. It's really happy to be here today with all of you. And it's similar to what Andrew said before. We have like the negative perspective and the positive one. So from a negative perspective, we really want to change things. I mean, we are destroying our planet. And for those who don't know this, moa used to be a bird that was living in New Zealand, and humans extinct that bird. So somehow we want to say we need to do things in a different way. We can't continue destroying our planet. And the positive thing is that we are in the right moment. We have the technology, we have the resources, we have the purpose, and we are in a good moment to start changing things in a big scale. So that's why we decided to create MOA. At the beginning, it was just my purpose, but now it's the purpose of the whole team of MOA, and we are just building this like global solution for fermentation with great partners like, well, MassChallenge, Big Idea Ventures, Bühler, and I don't know, maybe soon Planted also.
That's nice. That's the answer I was hoping to hear. I mean, despite being a crowded space, there is always room for more players, especially very innovative solutions that can work and improve the system. So I would love to see actually more and Planted working together. Now, I have a question from the audience that I want to take up now because it fits to the topic. It's from Hamza Aliyu from Nigeria. She would like to know how can you help the nation and the animals, especially in Africa, from hungry by sustaining sufficient food? Anybody wants to tackle that? Are you considering how to make an impact in Africa?
Well, from our side, from MOA, right now, for those who know the company, we have created an ingredient coming from byproducts from the south of Europe using one microbe, and that's what we are doing right now. We are scaling up that technology into an industrial stage. But the thing is that MOA is not just an ingredient developer. We have built a platform with over 300 microbes, and we are using over 20 different byproducts. So we are using byproducts to transform those byproducts into high value ingredients and proteins. And probably just now, we are just using these byproducts in our lab. But what we are looking for in the future is not only using byproducts in our lab in Europe, in the United States, also taking this technology, the fermentation, like the sustainability, the sustainable fermentation to all parts. So that's our purpose.
So bringing it local, that's a good answer. Yannick, how do you see that from an equipment manufacturing point of view, going local there?
So I think it's a really important question to ask, and I think it's very important also in the space of sustainable foods. You know, the way we tackle these markets right now are generally pretty high price points still, and that makes it inaccessible. And a lot of the research and all the startups that we see are coming outside of Africa. We are seeing more startups now, also as the culture hub from the continent of Africa, that we're very excited to see. I think the important part is that we have local innovation, local people, and a local sustainable production that happens there. So I would love to see how we can support African startups specifically in finding solutions that are relevant for the local market. And I think also important is we speak about taste. Christoph, you mentioned this already. It's about experience in the product. Depending on the culture you live in, that taste is different. So finding a local product that is highly relevant for that market, I think is where we should go, and supporting locals in creating those companies.
No, I think that answered the question. And probably right now we all agree that yes, alternative proteins can make an impact, but a lot of things has to happen at the same time to make that happen. And I think I have a question here for the audience as well, because it's very important or interesting to know if people here and everybody put your consumer hat on, would you pay more for sustainable products, despite of the taste, functionality, anything, just because it's sustainable? Would you pay more?
That feels like an unfair question.
It is an unfair question. Let me explain later.
The reason why it's an unfair question is because everybody will say yes. But when you actually have people going into store and taking their wallets out, far fewer will actually do the right thing. There's so many surveys in that regard, right?
That is correct. But what do you think is missing here, Andrew? I mean, to make that transition. And I will share here the results now, so you can see. Yes, 70% of the people said yes, and 30% no. Maybe something is missing, obviously, here. And do you know what that is, Andrew? What have you seen? What is missing here, the transition?
Yeah, it's a great question. It almost comes back to that question of why do people eat ice cream and pizza when they know it's bad for them, and why do they not eat salads every day even though they know it's good for them? So you can ask people, what the right thing to do is, and people will always, people are educated enough to know. But when it comes to the actual difficult decision in the moment, people don't always do the right thing. People don't always make the right decision. And that's, from my point of view, as somebody that's investing in young companies that are trying to make things better, you've got to sort of take into consideration that counterintuitiveness. And I was talking to somebody today, and I was talking to somebody today about food, and I said, what I really want is a food which tastes like it's bad for you. It's so delicious, it's so mouth-watering, it's so amazing. It tastes like it's bad for you, but it has a lot of nutrition, it has a lot of vitamins, and it has all of the things that you could possibly want. So in actual fact, it's good for you. If you have, that's the kind of magic ingredient, right? Or the magic here, having something that people love so much that they think it's bad for them, but is actually very, very good for them. If you could create such a thing, we'd all be, slim, gorgeous, healthy, etc. So that's the goal.
Okay, no, that's good. And I mean, Yannick here from a scale-up point of view, and I would like to tackle the question on the chat from Ferdinando. I mean, there is technology out there, but probably what Andrew mentioned is part of the equation. The other part of the equation to make that transition happen, from what I think is bringing the right equipment to market. And here's what I see you in charge, Yannick. So do you think culture meat or any other technology has the greatest chances of success to make the transition happen? Or how do you see that?
So I think we need to have a really holistic view on the food market. I think one of the key challenges at the beginning now is not which solution to pick. Is it cultured? Is it fermented? Is it traditional meats? I think right now it's having enough food accessible for everyone on the planet while the planet and society is changing. So I think we need to go for all. But in saying that, we have proven technologies in the market around plant-based. So let's use those and let's start scaling those. We also have solutions in the market on fermentation. And I know some of the companies are also on the call here that have solutions in that space. And then we go into cultured foods, cultured meats, cultured seafoods, cultured dairy. There we have solutions that we believe work. And we have different solutions that could potentially work as technology platforms. However, I think we still have a lot of learning to do and also a lot of working around the right processing to make that a relevant process in the market, a relevant technology path. I think in this space right now, it's important that we test, that we learn, that we move fast and iterate to have the right technologies available for everyone to use. And that today, I believe in the cultured food space is not quite there yet. The technology path is not defined. And that's all we need to work on as fast as we can.
I like the answer very much. And I would like to hear also from the audience, partially what Andrew was mentioning and not much of the technology side, but if for the people who said yes, that's fine. Let's assume we believe you will buy more sustainable products despite of other things. But for the one who said no, and actually everybody is welcome to answer, what are your drivers here to buy? I just to make it short, put plant-based products, but obviously I'm talking about every alternative protein product here on the market, from cheese, dairy, meats, anything, seafood.
Maybe one addition here, Nicolas, on the conversation we started. A lot of people on this planet do not have that choice. Would I pay more for this or would I not? A lot of people have the choice of do I eat or not? And I think we shouldn't forget about those groups in society globally who need food. And if we can make this the food that's accessible and available, sustainable protein, that's what we should bring to them.
That's a very, very good point. I'm seeing the results live now here, and I mean, there is still half of the people didn't answer, but I didn't see anybody tackling price, just one person now. The driver seems to be others now, but I fully agree with you that another audience perhaps. Please keep answering. Still some people to answer here. Well, I'll stop it now and share the results. It looks like here the results are, the drivers are environment, health, and animal welfare. Price, very little. Chris, that does match with your go-to-market strategy. I mean, are those exactly the points you're tackling? And if yes, why? And if not, why?
And where is taste, Chris?
Yeah, taste is in the repurchase rate. So basically, I think this are the marketing points. So environment, health, and animal welfare, and taste is the repurchase rate. So you can have a great marketing around environment, health, animal welfare. if you get bigger, you start to specifically target these points. But ultimately, what you see, I think, is data that never lies is the repurchase rate in that state. So it's almost like a hygiene factor, right? So when you get people to try the product for the first time, look at your repurchase rate, and then you know the answer on taste.
Okay, no, that sounds good. And probably this has been a very good marketing research for Bosco here. He will come back to his office and plan the next protein to tackle those points. So Bosco, I see you here as in charge of the functionality, because you're a B2B company, and you know what you have to bring to other companies for them to make the process work. How are you viewing here the consumer drivers versus what you are producing in a B2B setup?
Well, great question, because we don't know, and even the corporates don't know how to sell these solutions. I mean, the ingredients coming from fermentation, because it's a really difficult thing to talk about with consumers. So our target, well, the big corporates open our door with environment. I mean, we need to be sustainable, but that is not, we need to be tasty and we need to be functional. If we don't reach a good taste with our ingredient for those applications, meat analogs, bakery, snacks, they are not going to move further. And if we don't have a good functionality, we are only going to be able to add a little bit, a very small quantity of ingredient. So for us, as a B2B company, as an ingredient developers, we need to, our main things are taste and functionality, and always sustainable is our purpose. So we have developed this sustainable process and sustainable ingredient to decrease the carbon footprint of companies, of corporates and of startups. But our main thing is taste and functionality.
Okay, now sounds good. Thanks, Bosco. And I think partially that answered one question here from the chat, saying, why is it difficult for cities and regions to address the relationship between food, health, and inclusion? But not fully. I mean, yeah, there is a relationship between food, health, and inclusion. I wonder here in the panel if you have any comments to that question. But I think you already have answered it altogether, because on one hand, we were saying to make delicious food that is nutritious, obviously cannot be sold if one or the other is missing. And by inclusion, I would consider here the price point. The price point has to be accessible. And here a question for Mo as well as a follow-up. Is a protein you are producing able to compete with the cost of soy protein? And if not, what should manufacturers use instead of soy? And you don't have to go into details how much of protein is exactly, but probably an overview, a projection here, if it's going to be price something that is going to be a matter in the future, or it's not going to be really an issue?
For us, it's an issue since the beginning. So we are using a novel technology to produce proteins, right? And we have to enter some applications like meat analogs, dairy analogs, where the ingredients are less than 10 euros per kilogram. So we need to achieve that. Right now, we are not at that point. Right now, we are around 15 euros per kilogram. But we have built a plan to reach the price of soy in 2.5 years. And as I was telling before, we have the resources, we have the technology. Is a matter of time and also purpose from the society, right? But yes, we will reach the price of soy in 2.5 years if everything goes well. Because if we reach that price, then we will enter a lot of applications, other spaces, also pet food. So yes, we really need to achieve that price.
That sounds like a very bright and promising future. So it's good, very good to have people like you working on that. And here, just to clear up here before we move into a different topic, I have a couple of questions from the audience. probably this one can go to Yannick, because it's actually asking, I mean, if you do culture proteins, basically why? Because what is the difference between doing actual vegetal protein?
That's a really good question. So there's a few hopes that we have in the industry with cultured foods. And those specifically are around the aspects of taste and the aspects of texture. I think that is where cultured proteins can really make a difference in the products. And when we speak also to consumers, depending on who you ask, and a lot of them have different opinions of what they think is healthy and not healthy and processed, and what's vegetarian, what's vegan. You know, there's a lot of people that don't want to eat plant-based just because they don't want to.
Okay.
And I think cultured food adds a whole new element to that discussion, because you're creating the same product in a more sustainable way. So if you want to eat meat, you can eat meat in a more sustainable way. I think it's easier to change the product than to change people's behavior and culture, generally. So I think it's an opportunity for cultured foods to really have an impact.
Okay, thank
you. Nicolas, can I come back on that as well?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So if I just read the question out, what difference exists between a traditional concentrate vegetable protein, for example, pea, versus protein obtained through a cultured process, ? Vegetable protein, example, pea, wheat, soy, they're basically it's a protein source that derived from vegetables, obviously. Sorry to be kind of very obvious in that response. What we do with those three key crops is we create mimics of meat, or whether that's chicken or beef or whatever. Those products have different nutritional values when they're used, pea, soy, wheat, different nutritional values than traditional beef, pork, chicken, etc. They have a different bite. So in other words, they don't bite like a meat. You bite into them. They don't have the snap that you get from a traditional pork, beef, etc. So different nutritional, different experience from a bite and a chew perspective. Typically, they don't taste anything like the traditional meat product, pork, etc. So in every regard, they're completely different. In terms of a cultured process, you are literally taking an existing biopsy, often from an animal, whether that's a chicken, a pig, or a beef, and you're growing those real cells and creating a product made from real cells. So in other words, if you took a cultured meat product and you put it under a microscope, you would not, at a cellular level, be able to tell the difference between the cultured meat product and the biopsy you took from the animal itself. So it's not that it's performs like a vegetable product or whatever. It is actually at the micro level exactly the same as the meat and the animal you've taken that product from. So totally different, 180-degree opposite differences between a vegetable protein and a cultured meat protein. Just being really very specific about answering the question.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. That's good.
But I agree with what you're saying here, but basically cell culture could replicate better something in that direction. But I would like to see Chris, exactly.
I would challenge it, definitely. I think the point is like exactly that you said, better. So I think the question is what the problem we're trying to solve. So are we trying to solve on a molecular level, at the cell level, if you look under it on the microscope, if it looks similar or not? Or are we trying to solve for what I said in the beginning, taste, price, environment, and consumer health? So I think we stand here the unique opportunity of actually creating a better product, and not just trying to invest 10 years or 15 years to end up at the same point or same product, being exactly the same cells. I think what the unique ability is of an animal in terms of nutritional value is it is an accumulator. So when you have a single protein product and you eat that all day long, you will suffer from, let's say, a very unbalanced diet. You'll start to have hair loss, you start to lose teeth, etc. And I think we do not want that for any of our consumers, right? So in terms of replicating that accumulation process, because let's face it, what we feed an animal is different plant-based proteins, plus some vitamin B12, for example, because it doesn't exist natural anymore in the habitat. So we feed these nutritional ingredients to the animal. It accumulates it into proteins that have a more complex structure. I think there's various ways to mimic that or do it better, actually. And for example, fermentation, I think to hit the point, super important. If that fermentation level happens on an animal cell, single cell like algae or with other proteins, I think is not the point. You can do solid state fermentation on a product. You can do liquid state precision. You can do precision fermentation. You can do many things. And I think ultimately we'll find out what is the best way. So I think it's very good that we're working all on, let's say, different vectors. But for example, for us, we discovered that creating a scaffold from plant-based proteins, let's say at least for the next 5 years, combining that with fermentation, leads to that vector that, let's say, delivers closest to those 4 dimensions we want to be better than meat at. But in the long run, I think it's very interesting to get different vectors because it allows us companies like Planted, who try to create amazing products for consumers, better vectors to choose from. But I think we also need to be very honest with each other that we're now thinking very linear, like there's one vector plant-based, there's one vector fermentation-based, and there's one vector cell-based. Very likely, say about 95%, I would even go 99%, you will see a combination of different technologies to ultimately deliver on those 4 attributes. And I think that's very important to keep in mind. And I think it's a lot of people focus on different technologies. I think we need to focus more on product and what we try to solve and how we can combine different technologies.
Excellent. And Bosco, I assume you're on the same boat as Chris here, no?
Yes, true. I think that fermentation is enabling the industry to achieve really tasty and nutritious products. I think it's super interesting, everything that is happening around cellular agriculture. But for example, we have been doing in MOA some great applications in terms of taste for meat analogs. I know some companies that are doing great applications through fermentation for dairy analogs. And I think mixing plant-based and fermentation, we can really achieve good products, tasty, sustainable, and functional. So I truly believe that fermentation is going to be the really disruptive technology, but also I think it's really interesting what is happening around cellular agriculture.
Okay. Now I'd like to see the different views here. I mean, cell-based, certainly a huge potential there, but the same with plant-based. And if you combine the magic of just having the right experts producing the food, it's gonna make the trick. I mean, protein from Bosco, knowing how to extrude from Chris, and then you will have something in the market that actually is very similar to what consumer would expect. Now you can go the other route and produce something like the consumer wants to see from the very beginning, from cell culture. So the 2 approaches probably are very, very valid approaches. And here is a question of speed to market, scalability, and also a very important question here is where to focus. I mean, we have so many potential to do yogurt, cheese, we can do beef, pork, seafood, everything. So Andrew, where do you see the investments going now? What are the products that you see are the most popular today?
Yeah, I'm gonna end up having people yell at me now. I know I am. So we've made about 100 investments. We typically see about 500 companies every 6 months. We're starting to see, and this is at the seed stage, but we're also starting to see later companies and so on. We've been investing now over the last 4 or 5 years. In the beginning of the process, over the last 4 or 5 years, we were seeing some sort of CPG packaged goods companies, people that were trying to create the better burger, the more realistic burger, chicken nuggets, etc., etc. What we've sort of turned to over time, because a lot of those products in the plant-based category and so on were starting to look very similar to each other. They were all using, soy, wheat. In the plant-based category, they were all using soy, wheat, pea protein. So, 3 crops around the world being used predominantly to create most of the mimicked, consumer products. What we've actually focused in on over the last 3 years in particular are technologies which are more sort of sustainable, breaking down barriers in terms of scalability around plant-based, fermentation-enabled and cell-based companies. So if you take, for example, cultured meat, etc., the challenge with cultured meat has been scalability, the ability to create a product at a price point that's anything similar to the traditional meat industry. Most people are talking about 5-10 years away from today before we can get to that point, right? That challenge is being solved. There are kind of technology blockers that have restricted our ability to scale that technology and get it to a price point that makes it feasible or commercially viable. There are companies that we've backed and the companies around the world who are focusing in on those very specific challenges or those very specific blockers. So what's really exciting to me isn't a particular consumer product, whether it's cell, fermentation or plant-based. It's actually the way that there are entrepreneurs out there who are solving very specific problems that are the problems blocking a lot of these technologies from becoming commercially viable. So it's not here's a company that's doing great cell-based chicken or Wagyu beef like Orbillion, for example. It's companies who are solving the scaffolding challenge, for example, around cell-based or cultured meat. It's companies that are using the fermentation process to create, solutions for other companies, and they're kind of collaborating together. If there's one significant challenge for the whole industry, though, whether it's cell-based fermentation or plant, it's scalability. It's still scalability, even on the plant-based side. So we've got amazing technologies, great companies collaborating and working together, but no one's really unpacking what it's going to take to get to 1,000 tons a year or 1,000,000 tons a year, so that any of these technologies can really have the sustainability benefit that we all want them to have. So yeah, in answer to your question, there's not one brand or one company where I'm like, those guys have cracked it. What's happening is there's lots of entrepreneurs out there who are solving different things, and when you bring them all together, we're getting closer and closer to commercial viability for fermentation-based, cell-based technologies. And to Christoph's point, it's going to be a hybrid. It's going to be a combination of a lot of these technologies coming together and pooling their knowledge and learnings and IP and solving a lot of the commercial viability problems. Oh, and by the way, sorry, I know I'm going to one last point. We need the big guys as well. So we need the Bühlers, we need the Givaudan's, we need the kind of large global companies, because they know how to produce stuff in large quantities in an efficient, sustainable way, even though they don't always do it, but they have that knowledge. A lot of us who are solving the science around these things don't have a clue how to move from desktop or tabletop into, the kind of scalability that we need to have for these technologies to be sustainable and viable. And this is where Christoph and everybody throws rolls at me and tells me I'm an idiot.
No, I don't think so. But the technology hybrid approach you're saying is probably the way it is going now. And Yannick probably could tell more about that, what technologies are being more demanded. But I would be curious to know also from Yannick here, where do you see as a final product that the companies are going to? Is that chicken, is seafood, and do you see any particular trend, Yannick?
In all of sustainable proteins right now, you mean? Yep. Or in a specific area? In all of them?
Everything.
I think there's different approaches in the market, and I think all have a place. And Andrew, you spoke to us a little bit as well in terms of the diversity of products. I think right now it's really going to every single product we can find where we can create a solution, create an end product that is tasty and great for people. And Chris, you mentioned also about the behavior of customers. We need a good product on the market. And it doesn't matter if it's a seafood product, a chicken, a beef. I think something we're seeing is that the model of going for a more high margin product and then stepping that down to mass market is something that some startups are using. But also on the other side, we're seeing startups that are going straight for a more low value, low margin product like a chicken and trying to address the mass market. I don't think one or the other is necessarily the right or wrong approach. I don't know what you think, Andrew.
I mean, I think you both are making a very fair point here, and you're being very, very neutral here, and I understand that. But we have, for example, people like Chris betting everything on chicken first, and I see here, I see different consumer preferences here and on what they would buy first and where they would like to go, and probably that is not exactly matching with the developers, with the entrepreneurs, maybe developing something else, and investors may be going somewhere else. Let me ask here again to the audience, what products would you go for? Is it chicken? It's burgers? Yogurt? You can have multiple choice here. So what are your favorite products here? Good, it's going well. You like everything, so this audience is very supportive.
And it's very dependent on the market and the consumers, right? On what product and what market will work.
We saw here, we have a lot of different backgrounds, and see in the comments from Levana, you like fish, that would be seafood. I will put it there. Okay, we have most of the people answer. Let's finish this poll. 1, 2, 3. Okay, finished. Let me share here. So Chris, you were right. So chicken is a product that people are loving now. They like it, but also burgers, and that makes sense. Yogurt also makes sense. Seafood and egg. Egg is very curious because you have a comment here from the chat that there is a demand, a huge demand on egg, and that's coming from Steve, the company Not an Egg. There is a demand on liquid egg, and when I see the latest investment reports, Q3 very low in egg, only 3% of the total investments went to egg, and this is a mismatch I am talking to, because there is potential here. There is a demand for egg. Probably technology is almost there, and investments are, well, probably only this quarter didn't go there. I don't have an overview here. Probably not as good as Andrew, obviously not. But Andrew, I mean, do you see egg as a particular niche or a place where people should be putting more and more resources? Just to answer Steve's question.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at this list and I think where are we most interested from our point of view, it's got to be chicken. Egg wouldn't necessarily be the top of the list. It's seafood. Burgers, okay, maybe. I mean, yeah, so chicken is one of the most prevalent protein sources around the world. So that would be incredibly important. I mean, billions and billions of chickens are processed on an annual basis. So chicken would probably be the focus for us. Christoph, that's your key area as well?
Yeah, I think like today it's easier to give consumers some kind of a bridge of what and how should they use your products. So chicken works really well because I think our target demo mainly or has a great or high consumption degree of chicken. Our technology I think is very suitable for that. So I think it's a good fit. But ultimately, I think the consumer will start to accept more and more standalone products. So there's a second product, which is called pulled. It's sort of the direction of pulled pork, but we don't market it as aggressively on the pork side. It's a product, or in my view, it's one of the favorite products we have out there. It has a sunflower press cake in it, which is upcycled. So it's a waste stream we use. It has oats and peas, so it's, I think, very well balanced from a nutritional point of view. So I think, this is a product that I think people initially, like, it has less adoption than a chicken, for example, because chicken is very clear. A pulled, it's much wider, and it's also the application. I think it's the widest application you can use within the planted product range. And so you see the adoption and repurchase rates are exceptional. So I think over time we will be able to make these steps into products which maybe are not linked one-to-one anymore, but that are maybe different. And if I tour our science lab, there are like amazing things waiting there, but we just don't like have a link to an actual animal product. And so I think that's what we mean a little bit with better. I think in the long run, consumers will be ready to make that switch, but this is the very, very long run. And the food, as you probably all know, is one of the stickiest, where consumers are really, really sticky. Like, they may be more inclined to try a new car or a new phone or something, but food has a lot of traditional and, as I think Yannick pointed out, like very local taste profiles. So I think that's still kind of way. So for us, chicken was an easy way to start, but by no means, like on the science side, we do anything from sausages to fish. However, we choose carefully, like what number of new products we launch, what markets we address, where we see a gap in the market as well, because every time we enter now, we need to kick somebody else off a shelf. So we also need to choose wisely how we position our products. But like conceptually, we don't have a focus. Commercially, we do also need to face reality and make sure we enter with relevant products that find great adoption.
Thank you, Chris. And probably this is another quick market study for Bosco. Yannick, you want to?
I'll let Bosco. I was going to ask a different question, but I'll let Bosco go first.
No, because, okay, if it's a different question, let me...
It's on the same topic.
Okay. Bosco, I mean, look at the list. Look at Andrew said, what Chris said. I mean, the question is quite straightforward. Can your protein go pretty much everywhere, right? And how are you playing here to differentiate? I mean, there is a question on the chat as well, asking about the yield on the proteins that come from fermented sources versus others. And yeah, I mean, what is the differentiation you're looking here to play on those fields? And if you're focusing on some particular field?
Yes, so we are, so our first ingredient that we are going to launch soon next year to the market, it has specific functionalities and a specific taste. It has an umami taste, so we are tackling applications that are salty and are more like meat applications. We are also working in the cheese space, also in the pet food space, but we are really working in those like pork, chicken, but as Chris said before, like we don't need necessarily to mimic one animal product. The industry is developing products that are not mimicking animal like chicken or beef or whatever. So we have the opportunity to develop like tasty with a good structure products coming from fermentation, blended also with plant-based. So I would say that from a MOA perspective, our applications would be cheese and meat, any application in meat.
Okay, cool.
But also seafood. We have 2 pilot projects right now in the seafood space, and they also look very promising, but we are like in a early stage at the moment.
Okay, so from early on preparing the pipeline for the future, that's good. Yannick, your comment is still alive?
Yeah, I still have a question, and it's a question to the whole panel, basically. You know, we're speaking today about alternative proteins and how they can save the world and the environment. I think another angle to take on what product category to invest in or to support startups or to develop products is, where can we have the biggest impact on our environment? What product category? Is it the chicken? Is it the beef? You know, where do we have the biggest impact if we can choose one?
Well, it's beef, if you go by the math in terms of efficiency by animal. But I think what we see is that consumers, they like the animal, how do you say, connection, to know what to do with it. But actually, the replacements are not one for one. So people don't go in the store and say, I want to replace beef today, but they actually, like the way we track our shoppers, they go in with the intention to cook something amazing, like with a recipe in mind. And so that can very well be a different product substituting something else. So I think we obviously do a lot of comparisons, animal for animal equivalent, but looking at consumer data, I think it's a lot more complex. And actually, I think consumers are then more thinking in terms of obviously brands and product ranges that are available instead of what do I want to replace.
I would also say beef. But the thing is that, well, for those who know me, I love diving. I'm in love with the ocean. And I had the opportunity to go fishing for seafood in Mallorca 2 years ago. And the way we fish today seafood is incredibly destroying our planet, our seas and so on. So I would also say seafood. And there are some startups that I love, like Seahawk Meats, Gokus, companies that are really reaching a good structure, a good end product. And the truth is that we are destroying our planet fishing those products right now. And even more, we are giving grants for those fishermen fishing those products. So yes, also seafood, I would say.
Okay. Well, I think that answered your question, Yannick, and there is a clear focus on impact regarding sustainability here if we tackle those. Now, I think the question keeps coming back, and I see now on the questions chat from Arun Saini from FoodTech. It's easy for people to come back to animal-based products after they have tried some of the plant-based alternatives out there. And any thoughts on that? I mean, is it too difficult to get the same taste? Or I would argue differently, but I'm wondering here what Chris especially has to say in terms of taste. I mean, you are pretty much in contact with consumers here. You are, from first hand what they want or what they think they want.
Yeah, I think it's one of the key things. So we also start obviously to look at the landscape, track people. And one of the key, let's say, or easy dimensions to measure is NPS. And let's say for all the markets we track, we have amongst us maybe 2 others that have a positive NPS with consumers. And the rest is negative. So I think that goes very well with the overall adoption rate of alternative proteins, which is about 1% on a global scale. Markets such as UK maybe a bit further, other markets are a bit less developed. So yeah, I think it's the biggest one to crack. And I think we're very early in this. If you look at how long electric cars have been around until the breakout. So I think it's also very much for us companies to find a way to talk to consumers, deliver a product, value proposition that works and that keeps them happy. So one thing we measure is NPS. The other thing is the repurchase rate. Again, the industry is about 10 to 15%. We're above 50. So I think these are like key metrics you need to measure. And we're also just finding out over time, market by market, where do we work? And for example, like repurchase rates across the portfolio are not the same in every country. So we see different repurchase rates for different products in different markets. All good repurchase rates, but some are better than others. And so it's also for us a time to find out what is the actual consumer need, what are their expectations, how do they interact with the product. So people, for example, like funniest applications I heard is they wanted to make lasagna, the pasta you have in the lasagna in between. They wanted to make that out of our chicken and were disappointed it didn't work. And so it's also about like a lot to giving them a world of recipes that work and make sure that the applications work and all of these things, and being very clear in consumer language and what they can do and what they maybe cannot do with the product. So I think we're in the very, very infancy of that. And that's why you have 1% adoption rate on a global scale.
Nicolas, may I come back on some of this? So the question in my mind is, you know, can we really be successful if people can go back to what is comfortable, i.e. the traditional meat, the traditional seafood, you know, everything that is done today in the old way. I call it the old way, but the traditional way. Food, there's an expression in food which is comfort food. In other words, food that you sort of, that you like, it's very comfortable, it's very natural. And what does comfort food actually mean? From my point of view, comfort food is those foods you've been brought up with, those foods that are part of your family life, that are part of your culture. You had those kind of foods when you were 2 years old. You had those foods when you were 5, 7, 9, 12. You know, those foods we've grown up with that are a fundamental part of our experience with our families, with our friends, you know, Sunday afternoon lunch, etc., etc. That's comfort food. Can we really expect people to move away from what is comfortable, what is part of their family, cultural, and family and cultural experience? My argument is no, you can't, because people will ultimately go back to what is comfortable, what is culturally normal for them. So how do we solve the problem of sustainable food, sustainable meat, seafood, etc., dairy, and still deliver what is comfort food for people, the food they've grown up with? And in my mind, it's creating bio-identical food, bio-identical meat, seafood, and dairy in a far more sustainable way, so that people aren't having to be educated to do the right thing or being taught to do the right thing by selling them a very sort of marketing-driven or brand-driven alternative. What we need to be doing as innovators and as entrepreneurs and so on is giving people the food they've grown up with and that they love, but in a way that's far more sustainable. And I think we can do it. I think we can do it through plant-based. We'll get there. We'll hit that bio-identical target through cell-based, fermentation-based, plant-based. It's not to tell people, here's this product, and it's almost the same as the things you've grown up loving. It's giving them exactly what they've grown up loving, but in a way that doesn't cause the damage to the planet, you know, that we are as we are doing today. And I think we can get there. I think, you know, leveraging technology that Bosco and other people are working on, you know, bringing together the different folks working on these issues, and these sort of scale-up challenges. I think we can get to a point where people can go into a grocery store and buy a product manufactured in a way that doesn't require a skeleton and an animal and a life to be terminated to get you there. I think we can actually put products in supermarkets that are identical to the traditional products, but in a way that has far less of a climate footprint than today. I'm convinced of it. So it's not, let's do something different in a different way. Let's give them exactly what they have today, but in a way that doesn't require the harm that we're doing today. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, I think that we seem to be all in agreement here on that. And I'd like to bring some more controversy here to the discussion, but it's very difficult to do that because we all know that it's important to make that change. We know that alternative proteins can help to save the world. We understood very clearly the why that is important. We also discussed as well what is missing there, and we keep coming back to the taste question, and we touch on the price, and sustainability seems to be at the bottom of that discussion when we enter what is missing. So there is something there missing, and I think we are identifying what it is. We just need to make it happen. And to make something happen here, also we discussed there are certain technologies, certain products where to focus. But even if those things are there, why is not yet happening? And I know here Bühler is making very fantastic efforts here to put every player together. And Yannick, maybe you can comment us, how do you make that open innovation happen? And you are in the middle of all of these players and put them together and make projects happen. So how does open innovation help here?
That's a good question. I think that's something I've learned in past projects and also in this project is collaboration is not easy. And it's something that takes effort and it takes a will to do something different than you normally do it. And I hope at some point it's not doing it different. It's the norm for everyone. But today it's an effort for companies to collaborate, and it's something they need to be willing to do. There's always, the target is, speaking of partnership, and there's discussions around IP, discussions on technology, about how much market share you have versus the other company. I think again, we need to understand that partnership is that everyone on that table wins from this. And most importantly, society has a benefit out of this partnership happening. So I think that's where we need to focus, and that collaboration we need to be mindful about and be open about, and then seeing what players can support along that journey. And collaboration, not just on corporates, but I mean startups, universities, nonprofits. And we need an investment to do that as well.
Sounds good. I mean, Bosco, I know you like to cooperate with corporate. Why is that? I mean, what is the role of corporate collaboration or open innovation for your startup?
Well, the truth is that at the beginning, when you are starting a conversation with a corporate, you need to understand what is the objective of the corporate, because sometimes they just want to do open innovation scouting for startups, and you're going to waste your time as a startup. As a corporate, you are going to win knowledge about the startup space. But if you find a good match, and this is just an example, what we did with Bühler some months ago, we did one pilot project with them through the Scale It Up Challenge. And we wanted to learn how our ingredient was going to behave in high moisture extrusion. At the beginning, we were thinking, okay, this maybe is not going to work because we haven't reached 80% of protein. The taste is going to be a problem also for these applications, whatever. But thanks to this collaboration, we started doing trials. We were adding 5% to those products using soy and pea protein, then 10% that was working, and we were increasing the amount of our protein, our ingredient, up to 60% and 40% of soy. So thanks to that collaboration that at the beginning, we understood which were the interests of each party. For us, it was incredible because we have reached a great result with really little investment. And now we are taking this solution to the whole industry, to the whole society. And we have reached some points that at the beginning we weren't thinking that we were going to have those results. So I would say to be when you're going to work with a corporate, you need to have clear objectives for not wasting the time of the corporate and your time. But if you find a good match, go for it and be transparent and be ambitious.
Sounds good, but I would like to hear from Chris, because Chris, I don't recall Planted being cooperating with too many corporates in your journey, and even though you made it to market and you seem to be partnering more with the final consumer, I mean, talking about food service, retailer, why is that? I mean, it's a bit of different view here.
No, I think we advertise a bit less, maybe. But I mean, for example, Bühler delivers us extruders. So one of the key points to scaling is that we get these extruders faster. But no, joking aside, I think we collaborate with a lot of people. We also looked very closely like how we integrate in the industry. So on the science side, we do have hackathons, for example, that we do also for the community here. We have a Send a Protein program where we have very, very large corporates to very, very small companies send us protein. So Bosco, not sure, didn't look in the database if you sent us something yet or not. If you haven't, we have a program where we test the proteins. We can go down to 2 kilogram per hour production scale and test these things. So we've, I think, provided about 30 or 40 feedbacks to different proteins thus far. Then we also acquire tech. So we have a program where we acquire key pieces of tech. Just completed the deal out of a university where we acquire relevant IP, etc. Then on the commercial side, as said, like we have scale-up partners, which includes large-scale corporates such as Bühler and many other amazing companies. We need packaging as many other companies. We integrate into the supply chain. So we look, for example, where we work together with meat manufacturers on getting to the market, doing distribution. So I think we're quite flexible. We have many industry corporations. For example, you can buy from Arista, which is a Swiss bakery company. You can buy our chicken in their products and so on and so forth. This is very, very important for us. And then going to market, we partner with many amazing other brands in the space. We do tastings again with very large brands together to very, very small brands where we work together. So I think we always try to find a collaborative approach and find something that works. As I think Yannick said, typically on the science side, sometimes it can be more complicated, sometimes it can be easier. As we do, and that's one of the key things, maybe innovation, or which is, I think, underestimated in the space. And then I stop, but I think this is one of the key things we need to all figure out together is the freedom to operate. It's gonna, like, for this first generation of product, it was like very simple. It's like a lot of science from the 60s and the 70s, all published, all very open. But as we start to file, so we filed 7 patents today in 4 families. I think we all need to decide together on how we collaborate and how we work and how we each can ensure FTO. So I think this is going to be one of the very, very big topics going forward. And that's what makes collaboration sometimes a little bit more difficult.
That was going to be my follow-up question. Yannick, you wanted to comment on that, on the IP side?
I just want to say, Chris and Bosco, you know, both great examples of how you collaborate with a system approach and looking at the entire, you know, value chain that's involved, everything from the raw material sourcing to actually how you get to markets. I think when it comes to collaboration, a big part is trust. And there's natural selection involved in how companies work together. If companies support each other and they have a positive outcome, there will be more collaboration. I think naturally that will select the right companies to work with and the other ones will fall off the table naturally.
Okay. It looks like, I mean, collaborative approach is the most powerful thing we can do. And with collaboration, we touch the topics that Chris mentioned about sharing IP, freedom to operate. And from an investment point of view, that puts you kind of in a tricky situation, Andrew, I can imagine, because too much cooperation also may limit some exits. I don't know. How do you view that? And do you like them cooperating too much or not too much, maybe? And how do you support them?
Yeah. So we are, yes, we're an investor. And certainly, you know, we want to make sure that we bring a significant return back for our investors, but we do it in a slightly different way than is traditional. We don't sort of make an investment and then worry, are we going to make 2x or 3x or 5x from this particular company? We sort of realize that ultimately that's going to take care of itself. What we are focused on is finding entrepreneurs, scientists, and engineers who have a vision and a passion that we believe will have global impact, and they have the potential for global impact. And the reason we're looking for that is if we find a company, an entrepreneur, a scientist, an engineer that goes out and does something just amazing, just incredible, and it has a global impact, that will cause a redistribution of wealth because we're talking about in the meat, seafood, and dairy industries, they're trillion-dollar industries. So if we invest in a company that has a positive and global impact, there'll be an automatic and there'll be a redistribution of wealth. Do we need to then worry that whether we're getting a 2x or a 3x or a 4x? No, not really. What we need to worry about is how do we help the entrepreneurs, the engineers and scientists to be successful. That's how we get to the kind of exit that we want in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And frankly, who cares really? If we're making a positive impact on the world, there'll be a wealth creation. Getting back to specifically your question around collaboration, the global companies like Bühler, like Givaudan, etc., they are really good at certain things, and they need to work collaboratively for other things. Specifically, they're really, really good at distribution. They're really good at scale up. They're really good at making things in large quantities and getting them, delivered to multiple places, multiple channels throughout the world. They're really pretty bad at figuring out what's the most innovative new thing that they really ought to be getting behind. And that's where, people like Christoph, people like Bosco and so on, they're sort of figuring out where the market's going. And then if they're smart, they're collaborating with companies like Bühler to figure out how to get there at scale, and how to have that global impact that we're all looking for. So I want interestingly enough, I've worked in multiple industries, multiple verticals. The food industry is probably the most collaborative industry I've ever worked in. Everybody is figuring out how to work with each other. They're happy to work with each other. They're sort of open. They've got a much more open kimono in terms of helping each other out and guiding each other and supporting and mentoring each other. So much more so than software and all these other industries out there. Food is a very collaborative industry, and I'm really glad for it, because we're going to make these global changes together. We're not going to make it by having one company trying to do its own thing and ignoring everybody else. That collaboration is critical, and I thankfully feel like the culture of the industry is very much focused on that collaboration and working together.
That's great. Thank you for complimenting the topic like that, Andrew. And collaborative innovation is really a key aspect here. And I'm glad that although this is a panel discussion, we have consensus on that, and that's one way of make things happen. And we are approaching an end. I would like to answer very quickly 3 questions from the audience. If anybody from the panelists can answer it very quickly, let's touch the first one from Moritz, from Clay. What is the consumer acceptance here for cell-based products? And is that a problem? Or?
Depends what region you're talking about. Yannick brought up a point right back in the beginning, which is, some people don't even have enough food and protein for their ongoing existence. So, if you're picky about, are you using cell-based, are you not using cell-based? We're probably talking about the Western world where we've got an abundance of food. If you're in a place like, for example, Angola, where they have a really significant challenge getting the kind of core sustenance, you need a company like Bühler, for example, working with them on producing a grain production technology, a grain production plant, so that they can get to that minimum quantity of food from a food consistency perspective. So, and Asia, for example, they don't have the same concerns about GMO or about cultured meat and so on, because they're just really focused on how do we get more protein available for our people. So it's very regional, and it's very specific to the culture you're talking about. Western versus Asian versus Africa, etc., etc.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Another quick one. How do you differentiate between animal protein white meat and red meat? I assume the question goes into the direction, how do you make a white meat and a red meat out of plants? Probably, Chris, maybe your answer. I mean, you just extrude something and make your magic happen, right? Different ways.
The simple ways you see today of people making red meats is like you add food colorants. There are also processes that cause this. For example, on the fermentation side. And then you differentiate also as well if you change state or attributes of the product by temperature application, for example. So you would go from rare to medium rare to well done, for example. So I think that really depends. Today, what you see in the market, 99.9% is food colorants.
Okay, now that I think that answered the question very clearly. Last one, and very quick here. We have a question for Bosco or Andrew. Andrew, what is the yield of protein per kg in average for companies looking to create fermented proteins? And what is the typical ROI for the investment needed? Is that clear, the question?
Well, I can answer the first part.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that is the grams of protein per kilogram of fermented biomass, I guess. Okay, so it depends.
Protein, I guess, yeah.
It depends. So, for example, in our lab, we have seen that using the same microbe and the same raw material, we can change the protein concentration between 30 and 70% in the final biomass. So depends the yield, depends the final product that you want to reach. Because now what we are seeing is that a lot of big companies are not just looking for protein, are also looking for fibers coming from fermentation. So an ingredient having around 40-50% of protein can be more than okay as a fermented ingredient.
Perfect, sounds good. And
in terms of the ROI response, I'm not going to give a financial number by saying, we're looking for a 3x investment return or whatever. Our ROI response is we're looking for technologies and companies that can produce the necessary food for the 10 billion people by 2050 in a way that gives a planet that can be given to the next generations without destroying itself. So the ROI from my point of view is a planet that can support us in a sustainable way ongoing.
Okay, no, sounds perfect. Thank you so much. We are approaching to an end. And before we leave, we have still a couple of slides I want to share with you, because all what you have experienced here, what you have witnessed here is clearly a sign, a direction, an approach that if we get together and we choose the right technologies, we make the right investments, moreover, we work with the right people. And most importantly, if we make a choice, we can make an impact to change the disaster slides I was showing at the beginning. We are destroying basically the world, but now if we do a conscious decision on what to buy and what to build, we'll certainly make an impact. And hopefully we can have an air where we can breathe clear air without the emissions, a proper use of the fresh water, and not just going to waste, not having land wasted, biodiversity loss and deforestation, and moreover also having animals happy here, not cruelty. That is not the way we should be doing things. Now, if you want to get more involved into sustainable food solutions, don't miss this matchmaking context. We are going to launch next week. Every startup here, we encourage you to apply. We will match you with the right corporate to initiate cooperations. So stay tuned for that. Follow us in the MassChallenge LinkedIn website, and you will be hearing from us regarding that. And if you have time this Thursday at 6 p.m., we have our award ceremony from MassChallenge. We are celebrating our cohort that we just finished now. Very promising startups, high impact startups. And by now, around 300 companies have registered to be in that event. So it's a mass attend. And of course, keep following those convention lectures. They could be very interesting for you. So follow us here as well. And with that said, I wanted to say thank you. But before I just say thank you, please answer the last poll that's going to help us whether this was interesting for you, helpful, if we should keep doing it or change something. Your feedback is really appreciated and welcome. So let's give a big round of applause to all our panelists. They made an excellent job here answering all of the questions. I think things are much clearer now for us, at least for me. I got a very clear picture how to keep working. I hope that was the same for you in the audience. So again, thank you all the panelists. It was really great to have you here. Thank you so much, everyone.